We're going to go ahead and get started here. One of the things that happens is a lot of times when we start talking about, we get caught up a little bit in product nomenclature and product naming and acronyms and 3D things of that nature. So people will say to us, 3D via what? What is it that you're talking about? And incorrectly so, we make the assumption that a lot of people know what we're talking about or what 3D via is or does. When we're talking about repurposing your 3D CAD data, what we mean is really that customers have a great resource with the models that they're creating. And you're probably doing a lot of really great things with those models today. In fact, I know some of you in attendance today are doing some fantastic things with taking your 3D models and leveraging them for downstream manufacturing purposes. Really what we want to do today is what 3D via will help with is to sort of focus on that technical communications part or technical publications part of it. And it's a general term that we use because it has so many different areas in the company that it can apply to. A lot of folks are using this for work or assembly instructions, training materials, or even online parts ordering and things of that nature. So you're going to get an opportunity to see some of those things as we advance a little bit further today. Up on the screen is going to pop up a whole bunch of different challenges that some of our customers who are using this tool have come across. And I guess one of the things that as a consumer in this sort of consumer product society that we live in here, one of the things that I know that I come across is the whole some assembly required concept. And nothing really irks me more sometimes than when I've invested a lot of time on the internet researching a particular product, whether that's some type of camera or maybe in another instance maybe like a gas grill or something like that. And I've spent a bunch of time and of my energy and really my emotional investment into this product and researching it because I'm really hyped up about it. And then I finally work up the courage to sell my wife on the concept of going to buy this particular product. I get it home, I know it's some assembly required, and really the first sinking feeling or negative feeling that I have about a product sometimes is when the manual is really, really lousy. I never get over that. And what I guess I would add is we don't want to have, companies invest so much time, energy, and resources into their products. You don't want the first negative experience that they have about your products to be maybe a manual or a set of work instructions or something along those lines. So you probably have some challenges that, in your personal life as you've dealt with poor technical communications. And then you have some facets in your professional life that that there are areas in which you can improve that part of your business. So these are just a few that we wanted to list up here that we have come across in our short couple of years with this product. Most of the time when we look at people's current process, you'll see a couple things up on the screen. Relative to product documentation, what we find is it's something that happens after something has already been released or the design has already been done. And you're now in a hurry to produce that documentation as quickly as possible, either to get it manufactured out on the shop floor or to be able to ship it along with a machine or a piece of equipment or something along those lines because it's part of a customer requirement. And you put that work off in a lot of cases up until the end. Well, really the goal of 3D via Composer, or one of the goals, is to save some of that time and advance that documentation further along or sooner, if you will, into the design and the development process. And as you'll see today, what Darren's going to demonstrate is that by doing so, you're able to capture some of those hours and you won't have that panicky feeling towards the end when you have to produce that documentation to get it manufactured or to be able to get that piece of equipment shipped. Meanwhile, any changes that may get made to models, assemblies, things of that nature, Darren, as he's going to illustrate to you today, it's all associative with the content, the interactive content that you're creating using Composer. This is probably the most real basic slide that we have, but it kind of focuses on a problem that we really have in helping companies get exposed to this product. And what I mean by that is there are so many different places within an organization that this particular tool, 3D via Composer, can assist with, that sometimes we don't know where to help or we don't know where to start. For instance, I know I have one customer who's using this tool. their big issue that they have is a customer will call up to order a spare part, and a lot of times it's guesswork as to which part they actually need to order. So as you can see in the upper left, from a post-sale fulfillment perspective, one of the things that this company is looking to do is help streamline that process and give more confidence to not only their employee, but also the end consumer that that spare part that they're ordering, when it does get shipped to them, it'll actually be the right one, and it'll work, and it'll fit. Conversely, we have other customers, and really what they want to focus in on is making sure that they get the proper work instructions out to the shop floor in a timely manner. You saw a couple slides back where I had that digital image of somebody who had, it looked like a part that was going to be on a lathe that was being turned or something. And when you see that digital image, a lot of times what that signifies is you have to have a prototype that's actually been fabricated to some extent to be able to create that documentation. Why not repurpose your 3D CAD data and be able to take advantage of that so you don't have to fabricate a prototype in order to create that? So this kind of encompasses a general look or description, if you will, of 3D Via. Hopefully I've answered a couple of your questions about it. More than likely you probably have more than what you started with. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Darren Grosser. If you've met him before, you know he's an excellent application engineer. I'm sure he'll do his best to answer any questions that you guys have. Take it away.
All right, Scott, thank you very much. Okay, excellent lead-in from Scott. As he mentioned, repurposing CAD data has taken many forms over the years. And for the last decade and a half, our company's been carrying the torch on taking your CAD data and pushing it to CAM, pushing it out to simulation, whether it happens to be structural simulation, fluid dynamics, a variety of other things that can be done with that simulation. And then even physical rapid prototyping. So we're talking more or less using an object machine or something of the sort to be able to actually get a real part in your hand without ever having to make the G code and ever have to have a CNC machine involved. And those are things that are fairly short leaps as far as most people are concerned with their perception. But what we're trying to do now, as Scott mentioned, is really close the gap. Close the gap on a lot of things, whether it happens to be internal communications and how your own people consume this data, whether it happens to be that user's guide that goes into the box that has to sit on the shelf at the retail store, which means your parts and your products can't be shipped until the documentation is done, or the special machines that you might ship that when you have a 3-month delay on your manuals, it's that 3 months later that you finally get the full payment. And in these times, we want to get the payment as early as possible because the longer it stays out there, the least likely you are to eventually get the money. So we're starting with our SOLIDWORKS CAD data, and what we want you to do is more than just think about the manufacturing process, but think about the end game and taking this particular device that's already created 3D collateral and being able to use that and leverage that to go ahead and physically make your documentation. So again, internal manuals, things that you would consume directly within your own company. So I'm going to launch a really quick poll here again, another one that we had set up, because I'd like to get a feel for exactly what you guys are doing out there and maybe for what you'd like to do out there. So what kind of documentation do you currently create? And I put multiple choice on this one because PDF might be an encompassing thing that talks about some of the other ones. And just based on the numbers we're seeing coming in, that certainly might be the case.
It's kind of as we expected.
Yeah.
It's all over the map, and that's typically what we're finding is it's a multidisciplinary tool that gets used out there, and everybody has their own niche that it can have a benefit for.
Right, and I'll throw this one up so everybody can see it, but it's about what we expected. Very few people doing animations. I was going to put another poll out there, but I decided not to, but it was going to be what do you want to create, not necessarily what do you create, because we're kind of really at the leading edge with this type of a tool and making things that people don't currently do, which means we're not going to replace a current process. We're actually going to improve your process moving forward. So we'll go ahead and hide that and just let me get started on the things that I'd like to show you today about Composer. So here I'm sitting in the CAD system, and I'm just going to say the CAD system because when it comes down to it, the CAD data that Composer consumes is really irrelevant. We work with many, many different products. Now obviously DASI is a SOLIDWORKS reseller, so that's what we're looking at right now. And you see SOLIDWORKS and all the subassembly of structure, the part names, and the other property data that you would get. Property data by going to File and Properties. you're going to see information like date, author, project name. Some of this would be input or applied based on a data management system. Other things might be applied simply through the manual property input like we're doing now, or through the property manager inside the CAD tool. All of these things are consumable data that would then be used within Composer. Now if we move over to the Composer interface, the first thing I want to mention is that this was really designed for the non-CAD user. And what that means is there's an aspect of usability or ease of use that's really been baked into the tool. The documentation people aren't as very good with the CAD system or very complex tools. They're more using document tools, data processing, image documentation. And they're going to be used to a tool that's a little bit less in your face and a little bit easier to use when it comes to just simple streamlined look and feel. So what we have here is an import of that same CAD data directly from the CAD system. And again, I mentioned CAD system because when you say file open within Composer, the authorized files that you can actually look at aren't limited to what's under the DASI umbrella. You've got CATIA v4 and v5, which are nice because a lot of CAD systems don't even read those natively. Then you get your IGES and STEP, which will give you neutral file capabilities from any system we don't read natively. But you also have things like Pro Engineer part and assembly down here, and SOLIDWORKS part and assembly, and various other 3D type formats. So the CAD system again, or the originating 3D generator, just to be very generic, is really irrelevant at this point. When you bring the file in, it's going to read things like the colors that we have here, assembly position that you see currently, and under the assembly tab you can see the same structuring that we have here with subassemblies and their componentry within those subassemblies. So it honors everything that's built within the CAD tool itself as a great starting or jumping off point. When these documents are brought in, when the CAD files are read in, what we do is we generate views. Now I have several views up here that are generated already, and I'm going to generate a couple for you automatically just to show you what it takes. But what you can do is input much more than you could do even in a simple exploded view inside of a CAD tool. Here you can see that I actually have descriptive elements in here, these different arrows. We call those collaborative actors, which indicate more than just the difference in position. This is where the picture is worth 1,000 words really comes to light. And we want to replace the types of text that people normally do because in this ever-shrinking globe, so to speak, people are getting international very, very quickly, whether you're a company that's got locations around the world or whether you're just selling on eBay. We can talk to anybody on the planet. And translation has become a huge, huge issue. I'm not talking translation in the moving parts that you see on the screen, but translation of simple English to German. Now, the estimates that we get from all of our customers currently that are working overseas is that it's actually 25 cents per word to have a document translated by somebody who knows a different language. And if you're global and you're in more than one country, you can see how that can add up quite quickly with even just a very simple 2-page document. So we're trying to replace that with descriptive elements on screen in which text is unnecessary simply because of the way the display is going to show. So what I want to do is first give you a little idea of exactly how a view gets created inside of the interface. From an input standpoint, it's a ribbon-based structure just like any other Windows standard program these days, so all the tools are available to us without being bombarded with dozens of tools. Everything else is done through our View tabs and our Property tabs. And what I want to do is give you a little bit of an idea of how some of these parts explode or come apart. So real quickly what I want to do is just simply copy and paste a view. And this is just a very basic Windows thing. You can see right down here we've got a new view that I'm going to call battery removal, just something that means something more important. And with simple middle mouse button inputs, rotates and translates, we can change the way the things look on screen, not only positionally, but I could also very easily change things graphically, from shaded modes to more technical illustration rendered modes if you prefer, to even more flat shaded grayscale type modes. So there's a lot of different nice display looks that we can actually put on these particular parts. What I want to do is just position things so they look nice. And we're going to be dealing with the battery assembly that we have right up here inside of the handle itself. Now again, from an ease of use standpoint, we use simple things like translate, rotate, linear explodes, and even these spherical and cylindrical explodes are quite convenient. But what it's all based on is simple triad input. Using my control key, I'm going to start off by grabbing some simple fasteners here, the 2 Phillips head screws used to put this in. You see that we're presented with a triad that's much like you'd see inside of a CAD tool, only it's very descriptive and easy. By simply grabbing one of the legs, I can explode just by grabbing these parts and moving them into position. And we just continue. I'll do one at a time in this particular situation. We'll just grab our cover, We've got a little rubber button on the inside here, and then right on the inside of that we've got our battery. And all of that information is now put in place without taking up the time of a CAD user, which typically has a documentation person standing over his shoulder in order to accomplish something like this. What we're trying to do here is not only leverage the data, but also leverage the resources. And I'm talking a person here. I'm not talking necessarily the data at this point, because we want your CAD people to be working on CAD stuff, and we want your documentation people to be working on documentation stuff. And instead of getting half productivity by working together, this gives us dual capabilities because both people have access to their own tools. Now with the change that we have on screen, I'm simply going to update this view with a little right click. What that'll do is then capture what we've now done in this particular view. To add a little bit of look and feel to it, we can add some of those other elements I was talking about before, these descriptive arrows. And those will help us indicate direction and position. The arrow geometry shows on screen, but what's really effective about this is that I can actually snap to the CAD data just by hovering over it. You'll see that when I hover over one of these screws, it's actually grabbing the cylindrical face. Now by clicking, it automatically grabs the axis of that particular fastener. And I can click to add the length of that feature. Let's do that a second time over here. I'm going to grab the second fastener. We'll go ahead and again click to insert the length. Now what's happening on these is that we've got control over the properties. So much like I could go ahead and take this cover and actually change its color if I wanted to, something very, very simple to do. What I can also do is go ahead and change things like the actor properties. Simply selecting those on the screen allows me to do things like change the opacity. Very simple. We just go ahead and change sliders out here to make them more translucent or more opaque. Nifty little feature I have here called Stay on Top, which as you see display-wise, it looks like it's just sitting on top of everything. But if I rotate this, you can see plain as day that it is snapped to the axis of those two fasteners. So when I put it in the proper position, I can turn off that display on top, and it actually sits behind everything in the proper layering and the proper bring-to-front grouping that we would expect to see. Not only that, but we can easily go ahead and change the colors of these if necessary. I'm just going to go ahead and leave mine as a standard red. But also, just like the geometry that we have out there, I can use my translation and rotation tools to position these exactly where we'd like to see those. And now that I like what I see here, I'm going to simply update my view again to capture the changes that we've got there. And now you'll be able to see that in a very easy manner, we can go back to a previous view. You can see exactly what's happened here. I'm going to go ahead and reposition this one, and then we'll click on my battery removal, and it will simply rotate us around and show the explosion of each of those fasteners and features. So making views is a very, very, very simple thing. Now, how we consume these views internally is the next step. And I've got a variety of workshops that allows me to really make what I need these images to be, depending on, again, the downstream use for those. So I can either use technical illustration, which is a scalable vector graphic image. And that's one of those things where I can produce it at whatever size I choose, and it can be scaled up and scaled down without loss of resolution. That's what vector graphics means. I can also use high-resolution imagery, which is all raster-based, pixelated type images, but I've got a tremendously size, unrestricted type tool here where I can make up to 9,000 by 9,000 pixel images, which are just absolutely massive, considering most high-resolution laptops are about 1920 or so by 1280. So imagine that 8,000 pixel or 9,000 pixels is roughly about 4 to 5 times larger than even a high-resolution monitor at that resolution. And then videos, which I'll do briefly here at the end. Main thing I want to do is just go ahead and kick off some high-resolution images. It doesn't matter where I start or what views that I have here. I've got some simple settings for pixel size, DPI control, and image size. And what I'm going to do on this one is actually just save off a series of JPEGs indicating what all of these images happen to be. So to do that, I'm simply going to go ahead and select one of my profiles. Now profiles are simple because what they do is they save the settings that we see down here in a list selectable format so that I don't have to re-input these every time I want to make a change or add some information. That said, what I can do here is set things like resolution, anti-aliasing to get rid of those angled, jagged lines upon creation, and even things like removing the ground and making it a white background, even though for my purposes I made it a gradient background just for look and feel. On my documentation, I don't really want that. So here we're just going to go ahead and save those out. Now I've got a generic folder on my desktop called New Folder, and we're just going to go ahead and save all the images there. When I click Save, because I had this little checkbox selected, it's actually saving a view or an image with this setting for every single one of the views that we've got on the screen. So if we go over and take a look at that new folder, what it's now done is it's generated a view, a JPEG, for each one of those views. So that's exactly what we expected. Now, if I take a look at each of those JPEGs, you'll see the resolution and size. The anti-aliasing, again, has made all those angled edges look very, very fine and clear. And it's just a nice way to be able to freely produce a view and then kick off whatever size you want to consume downstream. Now, I've changed up the way that I show this a variety of ways as this product's evolved. And what I want to do now is actually show you from very, very start to finish how I would use these images, and then furthermore, how these images would then update later on. And I'm going to use two different products as an example here. I'm going to use Microsoft Word because chances are you already have this product. If you don't have Word, there's a lot of other things that people use. But from just a generic standpoint, Word is about as bare bones as it gets. If you have Office Professional, you might have access to things like Publisher, which is more purpose-built for actually creating documentation. But Word is a pretty standard way to do things. And what you see is that I have several of these images actually used inside a Word document. Well, on my last page here, I've got instructions for replacing this battery, and I don't have an image in there yet. So to show you how this happens actually inside of Microsoft Word, this is just a basic object linking and embedding. I'm going to simply say Insert, Picture. Now with Word, what I have to do is navigate. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my new folder. And in my new folder, I see those series of images. The one that I'm going to use is going to be this battery removal image. But you have to be very clear when you use this insertion option. Insert is just going to embed. What I want to do is actually have an active, updatable image inside my Word document so that I don't have to touch it again if changes come right down from the top. So when I hit this, I'm actually going to do a link to file. In this case, I'll do an insert and link because it'll now put the image in the document and it will go ahead and actually link to the original. So if the original changes, we'll get a nice update here. Other things that can be done in Word happen to be with positioning. I can take this image, I can replace it, I can go ahead and actually change the word wrap options. So if we actually go down and look at word wrap, what I want to do on this one is actually just have a simple tight word wrap. And I'm going to move that over to the side here, and we'll just watch the text wrap around it. So now that looks pretty good. We'll come back to that image here in just a little bit. Maybe we'll just make it wrap a little bit for sake. So that's what we're looking like in Word, and it's repetitive if I do that over and over. Now for those who actually do technical documentation every day, they might use a little bit more powerful or purpose-built tool like Adobe Illustrator or FrameMaker or tools like that. And those are pretty typical out in the industry as well. Now to insert images here, it's a little different. I actually have to say File, Place, but the results are pretty much the same. So what I'm going to do is just start out with my basic spreader image. It's going to bring in an image that I could resize and reposition anywhere I'd like. So we'll scale that down and just move it around. Let me do that a couple more times. Just do a File, Place. What looks good? We'll do the opening of the spreader on this one. The images that I'm using here are really irrelevant for what I want to do. What I also have is some other captions that I've already got in here, and they're just on different layers that I've turned off. So let me turn those on and give you a really good effect for what a final image is going to look like. Let's do two more of these. Insert and place. How about taking the pivot pins out? That one's not bad. And then the last one I'll put in on this one as well is just going to be the replacement of the battery. All right, piece of cake. Now, in just a couple of minutes that it took me to do that is really all it takes. And I hope in my little effort there to show you this will really give you some comfort and demystify the use of these types of images downstream. So this is what we're looking at currently. We've got our basic original design, and now I need to actually go ahead and make some serious changes to what happens to be going on right here. Before I do that, though, what I want you to see is as I select an image here, you can see that they are physically linked. And if I go ahead and show you the list, it actually shows me some statuses. And that's one of the nice things about publishing tools like Publisher or Illustrator, is they give you an idea of what the current status of these documents happens to be. All right, well, let's go ahead and make some drastic changes. I'm going to go all the way back to SOLIDWORKS. And I'm going to make a little change here to this assembly. Let me go ahead and grab my handle assembly. Now you'll see the actual new assembly that I'm going to use in place looks drastically different than what we had in Composer. What I want you to focus on is this area right here, because the previous design I'll show you in a second is more of a bent tubing, and what we've got here in our new design is actually more of a welded type frame with a bracket at the bottom. So we've now made that change inside the SOLIDWORKS file. I'll go ahead and hit save on that, and that'll make sure that the change is taken. And now we're going to actually move back over to Composer for a moment. If we take a look here for a second, what I want you to see is back on my base image. But you can see that we have the old handle inside of my Composer document. Now this refers back to what Scott mentioned about doing documentation in parallel. Essentially what I've done here is I've made a composer document. I've made a bunch of images and I've made a bunch of manuals. And my design is now about to change drastically. Now this isn't something that's farcical or just made up. This happens every single day, sometimes several times a day. And the tool that we're looking at with Composer is meant to be very nimble and very receptive to this. So now that I've got all this documentation done, my design changes. For most people, this is a do-over. You actually make a new part, you got to take new digital images, you got to make new documentation. And we eliminate all those steps. All I'm going to do right now is select the part or the assembly that's updated. And I'm simply going to do something called a geometry update. Simple as that. We're going to go ahead and find where that file happens to be. This is going to be exactly where that SOLIDWORKS handrail part is. And what I want to do is just simply go ahead and update it. Now when I click update, keep an eye on the image on the screen. When I say update, it's actually launching, in my case, SOLIDWORKS in the background. But for people that don't have SOLIDWORKS on their computer, it actually loads up a translator, so you don't need to take up a SOLIDWORKS seat to use Composer on a computer without SOLIDWORKS. The main thing I wanted to show you, though, and you saw it happen pretty quickly, is that my base view image actually changed. The new geometry is now there. And if we go ahead and look at any other views that had that part in it, you'll see that those views have also dynamically changed. So no matter where I go, including the one that I created for you, this battery change, you'll see that my battery explode is identical. But if I zoom out just a touch, you'll see that it is actually the different handle that's in there, not the original handle that I generated this particular view from. This is key, because this is where the cascading effect starts and becomes very apparent to the user. Well, now that my imagery is updated because of a simple CAD change, what I now have to do, and I say have to, but it's not a difficult step, is to simply resave all my images. Now again, with this thing checked, I do it all in bulk. So one save as, we'll go back to our new folder, and I don't have to touch anything in there. Go ahead and just make sure that our images are going to be updated completely. Just go ahead and hit save out there. Make sure we've got all of our files selected properly. That all looks great. Fantastic. So now we're just going to go ahead and hit save, and it will write over every single one of the views that we just had out in the new folder. Every single one of those views being done, all I'm going to do now is go back to my other two documentation tools, my Word and my Illustrator. Now when I click back over to Word, there's a couple of ways that this can actually happen inside of Word. Inside of Word, there's a file, update links to files, and there's a manual process that can be done here with this manual updating. What you can also do inside of Word is very simple. It's just simply click it and hit F9. What that will do is actually update the images. Now it's hard to see on this one because that was off to the side, so probably not my best example. But when you see what Illustrator does, we'll just simply click over to the AI file. It actually yells at you right away. It says, some files are missing or modified. To the links panel, would you like to update them now? So when I go ahead and say yes, keep an eye on all three of the images that you can see the handle readily, and you'll see that without any effort, my documentation is now 100% up to date with exactly what my design looks like. So there's an associativity factor here that leverages things like typical object linking and embedding that really does allow you to do your documentation without your design ever being locked, and then once things are done, it's just a simple refresh from start to finish. It's not difficult. It's definitely not a do-over. So it's a very, very, very powerful thing that we do within the tool. And the last couple of things that I want to show you are new ways, things that you don't even do today or things that you may not have even thought about for the use of this type of imagery. The first thing I want to do is just a very, very basic animation. Now animations can be done directly within Composer, and they're done just by simply switching from our view mode over to animation mode, which then activates our timeline along the bottom. Whenever we're looking at timelines, what we're really talking about is keyframed or keyframed motion, keyframed animation. And what I can do is actually do a poor man's animation just by taking these static views that I have and simply dragging them over one at a time to my view. And by dragging each of those onto my view or onto my timeline, what I end up getting now is a timestamp for all the things that have changed at each one of those locations. If I go ahead and grab my removal of my jaws and I drop that on second number 3, what you'll actually see is from start to finish is that it's going to pause for 1 second, and then it's going to rotate and go over into position to show you what these parts look like. Now I like to have pauses and dwells built in, so I like to put the same view in a couple of times typically. But what I want to do is just show you a little bit about how I might go ahead and manually create an animation, not necessarily using the views to generate these things. So to do that, what I want to do is simply move my timeline to a different position. And by doing that, what I'm actually going to do now is reposition what I see on the screen. Let's go back to that really pre-position, move my timeline, and then I'm just going to simply move things to a different view on screen. And by doing that, I can capture things like simple view changes. Here we go. It's animating over to that view, and then it's going to pause there for a while. With this, I can show you how this exploded view would be created manually. Here, what I might do is take my two fasteners. Just to make sure I've captured where they are, I'm going to lock that in real quick. And I want them to take 1 second to explode. So with them selected, I will simply pull them off the screen, right to there. Anything that's changed at the different point in my timeline gets documented. So that point at which you saw the animation move, and then that point at which you saw the change happen to the exploded parts, is what you see on screen as my keyframes move along the timeline. Now I'm going to overlap the next explode. So what I want to do is actually pull my timeline back from where those fasteners finish their positioning. And this time we're going to grab the cover. And with that, I'm going to start it right there. And at the 8-second point, I want that cover to move out to right here. So now that we've captured all of that, what you'll now see is fasteners move, and then before they're done, that cover is going to start to come off as well. And then it will continue. And I can do that over and over. We'll grab this piece here and capture its position. We'll move along 1 second. We'll explode that just a little bit. Very simple. It automatically keyframes the change that we've just made. And then the last thing might be our battery. We'll go ahead and pull that out. And again, positionally, I'm actually going to do 2 things on this one. Let's go ahead and pull that out to right there. And then we'll move along to 10 seconds and pull the battery up. And then from right there, last thing we'll do here is just simply fade that battery away. Using our properties and opacity, let's simply fade that to nothing. Now by doing that, I did very, very little work. But in effect, what I've created is this, a very simple animation. And that should explain to everybody, without any words involved, exactly how the battery comes out of this particular device. No words necessary. Now this can be saved off as a standard AVI. It can be also saved in a format that can be used on a website very, very effectively. Now speaking of websites, the last thing that I want to do with this is go ahead and show you a brand new way to get those service documents out there on the web so that when Scott's problem with having a part that he doesn't know where it is, where it goes, where it's from, can be solved immediately by one simple trip to your website. So what we're going to do on this one is I'm going to go back to that battery removal image that I was creating earlier. And I'm going to change this up just a little bit by repositioning it. And we'll just snap a new version of that. Now on this image, what I want to do is actually create something that's interactive with people. And I'm going to do it just by selecting a few of these components. We'll go ahead and select the covers, the fasteners. That's fine there. And then we'll grab the battery. And I'm just going to be focusing on these couple of parts. And what we're going to make here is actually going to be a bill of materials. Now, a bill of materials to some people is different than a bill of materials to others. When we're talking technical publications, typically a bill of materials isn't more about the all-encompassing part number and name and purchase price and things. But here it's going to be effective on just the image we're looking at, on just the page that we're dealing with. So over here in my workshops, what I actually want to do is switch over from high-resolution image to BOM. Now with this, I want to go ahead and generate bill of material IDs for everything. And we're just going to do those for our selected components. Let me just make sure that my BOM tab is over here. And you can see that I've got a quantity of 2 on the fasteners, 1 battery cover, 1 battery cover seal. With that, I can also go ahead now and take my selection and assign some callouts. And these callouts are effectively going to be the balloons. The balloon's height can be changed quite easily. We can change this to have a quantity export or exponent, which is kind of cool there. We can even change the way it looks, which currently we're showing a shape of a circle. I prefer to have mine have none in some cases. You can even change the text and or exactly what the metadata, the property from SOLIDWORKS or any other CAD tool that's being used for this. So if I change it to description, you can see very ugly, but they're overlapping there, that these all have their physical descriptions from the CAD system. So all that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to switch that back over just to simply being the BOM ID of the actor. That looks fine. Now, the position of those can all be changed relative to each other just by dragging those around the screen. We can put them in a new position if we prefer, or they can just be in a simple free position. Now, the free position is kind of fun because I can position those wherever they make sense. On top of that, we can go ahead and add in a nifty little tool that we have called a magnet line. Now, with a magnet line, I can draw a line anywhere I want to. Horizontal, vertical position snapping is there, but mainly what it's for is snapping these actors to it and automatically repositioning those in bulk. So if I grab the magnet line and I want to change its length or spacing or its orientation, it's a very, very easy thing to do just by using the one-stop shopping magnet line in order to control that. And you can even do things like controlling where the handles happen to be on the parts so that maybe they make a little bit more sense as well. So now that I've got this in place, what I'm going to do is just simply show the bill of materials table. Now the BOM table right now happens to be a small scale type item, but what I want to do is just use my font tool, which should look familiar to everybody when I select it. It looks exactly like Microsoft Word. We'll go ahead and bump that font tool up a little bit. Maybe we'll reposition where that BOM goes and put it in a spot that makes sense. Put that right up here in the corner. All that done, I'm going to simply update my view. And what we have here is a nice descriptive view. You can see what things are pointing to, what the BOM number is, and what part they happen to control. But what I want to do is show you a better way. We're going to go ahead and save this off as what we refer to as a technical illustration, or SVG. Now with SVG, what we're actually going to do on this is go ahead and kick this off as a vector graphics component. Now the vector graphics component itself automatically has interactivity built into it. So I'm just going to simply hit preview. This file is viewable within Internet Explorer 8 or 9 without any type of plugin, or it'll automatically put the plugin in. But what it gives you is that technical illustration look and feel. Now again, I'm viewing this on a web page, and I can't emphasize that enough because that's how your consumers or your customers are going to consume this as well. What it gives you is not just a snapshot image. It actually gives you full interactivity. So if you're standing there with one of these fasteners in your hand or two pieces that used to be one piece of the Home Ultra cover, all you have to do is select the component, and you'll see not only it, but also its call-out, highlight, and the bill of material line item. Or if you know the item number, you pick on the bill of materials, or if you know the number, just pick on the call-out. It's a very easy, very interactive thing that happens automatically and seamlessly. Now to show you a little bit more depth, what we can also do is put hyperlinks on the parts themselves. And by using those hyperlinks, the beauty there is that I can have a much more complex looking image. Same type of interactivity. I pick on the component, I go ahead and pick on the note or the call out, or I pick on the bill of materials line item, and we see them highlight. But what I can also do is hover over different regions. And in this particular area, I've got the handle. That actually drills down or links to another image called the handle. Even furthermore, to the depths of the handle assembly. And all we're using is a web-based interface. Back and forward is something people know how to use already. So it's a beautiful output that gives people the ability to drill down and interact with the pictures, which is visually what they have in their hands anyways. So there's a lot of different ways to really get these consumable documents out there and in the hands of your customers. Again, this is just on a web page. The last thing, which is just a simple result of the animation, is a save as HTML. And here I've actually got the animation saved out onto a web page. So again, a user can consume this by simply going out to your website and by playing with the 3D Via Composer player directly embedded within an HTML document. Now here the user isn't stuck with a static image. They can actually stop this anytime they want to, and they do have rotate, zoom capabilities. They can even do other things that you might add them, give them ability to do, like add cutting planes or change properties or do things like that. So directly within a web interface, it's pretty amazing that I can actually select on a component and change its color without having any other controls over that. Let's go ahead and make that a little bit chromed as well. So pretty cool stuff. So with that, what I've shown you from start to finish is where files originate within a CAD system, which is typically where it's done anyways. Those files are then added into Composer through a simple file open methodology. Within Composer, we go ahead and generate a series of views in order to be descript for single steps of an assembly or disassembly instructions, all the way to an animation, and furthermore to an interactive image on a website. And then we've shown how when changes happen in the CAD system, how it can automatically transfer through the Composer document out to the images and into your image creation and documentation tools like Illustrator or Word or FrameMaker or Excel. The list goes on.
Looks like, Darren, there's a couple questions that are out there.
Does this work with other CAD files besides SOLIDWORks? Yeah, the question there just simply refers to what we can bring in. Now, CAD files can be a few different things. It can be specific to CATIA V4, V5, Pro Engineer, or SOLIDWORks native files, no translation necessary. And if it doesn't fit within that list, you could export an IGES or STEP file, both of which will retain things like the assembly structures, part colors, and all those other little iterations that we need to read them into Composer directly. So that was the first question. Does it work with other CAD files? Next question. If someone who does not have any SOLIDWORks experiences uses the tool, do they need to know how parts are mated together if they want to move the parts around in Composer? The answer there actually is no. Composer does not use the mates from a CAD system. And originally, me being a hardcore CAD user, that didn't sit well with me in the beginning. But what I've learned is exactly why I don't need those mates, other ways to move parts within Composer. And actually, some of the CAD knowledge can tend to get in your way a little bit because you try to do things the way you would in a CAD system, where this tool is built to be, again, lighter and easier for the more novice users out there. So we don't need to know anything about SOLIDWORks, frankly, or the originating CAD system to use that. Next question is, what is the learning curve for 3D via Composer? The class that we have is actually a 3-day class start to finish. It used to be two 2-day classes, two essentials classes and then 2 advanced. And what we've actually done is pared down some of the advanced functionality, which is actually, believe it or not, a lot of advanced functionality is going away because it's being streamlined and automated. So that's actually an improvement. But we've now made it so that we can actually do the entire class. 2 days are necessary. The 3rd day is for anybody that wants to get into some heavier types of things that we would do in the software. But the learning curve is quite light. We've had some documented examples where documentation people whose roles in the company actually were simple documentation, one of which was also a receptionist. And they're actually, within 3 weeks, were creating some pretty dynamic animations for their customers over in China and Japan. So pretty awesome stuff, and they were very novice users, good with a computer necessarily, but not with any other software. Last question I have on the list is, how is revision control typically done? Can this be used with an existing SOLIDWORks vault? So I'll answer that question 2 ways, because existing SOLIDWORks vault can actually mean workgroup or enterprise vault. So we have 2 different existing SOLIDWORks tools for data management. A workgroup would simply treat these files as it would any other non-SOLIDWORks file. It would treat them as like a Word document or a JPEG or an email, which we can check in and we can bump the revisions of, but it does not have an interface within the tool. With Enterprise, I will also say it does not have an interface within Composer to get to your enterprise data, but Enterprise 2011, which is our latest release, fully integrates Composer when it comes to previews, viewing the actual Composer imagery within the preview window inside of Enterprise Data Management, and it will revision control and bump those things automatically there as well. So Enterprise is more seamless because of the interface and the previewing, and Workgroup is going to treat it as typical images, typical files, but all of which can be used to revision control and bump these documents.
We'll go ahead and we'll wrap things up here. If there are additional questions, by all means, please feel welcome to send them to myself or Darren. An email went out to everyone this morning. Feel free to reply to that with any questions you have. Probably your direct account manager or our product manager, Brian Morrell, will follow up with everybody directly, really to get a sense of your thoughts and where you feel that a tool like this, whether it's tomorrow or 10 years from now, could have a benefit or play a role within your organization, and how. We realize that the demonstration we showed you today was very general in nature. One of the things that we really like to do with this particular tool, because it's such a multi-discipline tool, is really to take a look at an individual customer's technical communications or technical documentation that they need to create, see some examples of how they're doing it today and what they're producing, or a vision of what they would like to produce if they don't have anything currently created, and then possibly get some of your SOLIDWORKS models or other CAD models that you may have and show you how we would approach a similar task and kind of walk through step by step how Composer can have a benefit for you. So expect that we're going to follow up with you and have a discussion about, if and when that next step is appropriate. And if there's any questions in the meantime, by all means, please feel welcome to get in touch with Darren or myself. Finally, just want to thank everybody for attending. make it a great week. Thanks, everyone.